What's up, gang? Thanks for joining the Undiplomatic Podcast, the show with undiplomatic takes about the foreign policy scene. I'm your host, Van Jackson. This is our newly regularly scheduled dumpster fire episode where we check in on the dumpster fire that is world politics. So, just as a reminder, if you're an Undiplomatic newsletter subscriber, you'll get these dumpster fire episodes, cleaned up, maybe edited a little, some music behind it or something, but basically live, usually same day at a minimum. Also, if you're trying to check in on my writing or the more rigorous version of my thoughts, on diplomatic.com, on hyphen diplomatic.com, or if you just like the fact that I'm fucking on one half the time about foreign policy stuff and the undiplomatic candor, if you will. The way to keep the lights on, or help me keep the lights on, is on diplomatic.com. For now, that's the way. So yesterday I was on one, and I did an impromptu live show about Trumperialism, Trump's imperial foreign policy. What's really not awesome, heartening, is that just in the last 24 hours, like since I did my thing, I've also seen a bunch of mainstream international relations scholars jump on that same shit, literally naming, shaming what Trump is talking about. With they sort of like don't mention the Mexico and Canada annexation thing, and I hope that that's not because that they're down with it, but they are seeing the Trump remarks about the Panama Canal and Greenland as straight up imperialism, and there's no way to deny it. The only thing you could say is that Trump won't actually do it. But like Paul Musgrave, Dan Dresner, these are like normal mainstream scholars of international relations, like they're not radicals. I'm not even sure they're progressives, and this is they're registering the same analytical thoughts I am about this, so there's something notable there. I should also mention too, like yesterday when I talked about what like 21st century imperialism looks like, I briefly mentioned that Trump had linked it to great power rivalry and China shit, So there was a way he was using China fear mongering and China competition to launder this claim of annexation, dispossession, resubjugation of the Panama Canal, right? To just like launder naked conquest in a sense. And the way that worked was like in his tweet, he mentioned China as the reason, right? He's said it. He's like, China controls the Panama Canal or whatever, and that can't be allowed. Well, again, I'm not in the business of fact checking Trump, because what good is that going to do? But it's just a fact that China does not actually control any part of the Panama Canal, right? Long before great power competition was a thing, there has been a subsidiary of a Hong Kong-based firm called CK Hutchison Holdings that has managed two ports on either side of the Panama Canal for years. This is not control. This is not China per se, and it's not even a state. It's a company, based out of Hong Kong. So let's keep that in perspective when we hear a lot of gaslighting. I even saw like a little policy brief write up about the Panama Canal shit from CSIS, and they treated it like it's, well, Panama Canal annexation, it's a policy issue like any other. First of all, no, it's not, fucking not. What are you talking about? It's imperialism. You know what I mean? But also, the way they pitched it was like, we should be worried about, Chinese control of this strategic choke point, the choke point logic, the China fear mongering logic, all of it getting laundered through like think tank intellectualism. And then ultimately it gets uptaken and used by these fucking Trump MAGA mongers. You know what I mean? So that's all fucked. For those who did not catch the, hey, I can see people on the chat now. Booyah. This is good. So, for those who didn't catch this shit yesterday, I'm going to play just one quick highlight to wrap up this whole Panama Canal imperialism thing. Because, like, there's a way of thinking about the Panama Canal shit where you're just talking about the Panama Canal per se, instead of what's actually going on, like to make sense of it rather than to current eventize it. And so my make sense of it shtick is this right here. Let me just play this highlight for those who missed it. Booyah. Imperialism creates hierarchy. It creates it's a system of exclusion. One of the ways that you can continue accumulating capital in a world of declining growth, of a shrinking pie, it's probably not going to be by investing in fucking AI, jerk off, jump the shark technology. The way you accumulate capital in a world of shrinking growth is that state power. It's not just through great power rivalry. You know a much easier way than great power rivalry to secure the bag? It's fucking dispossession, resource extraction, exploitation on hierarchical grounds, on the grounds of like, these guys are the wrong religion, these guys are the wrong race, That's what we're moving toward. That's the scary fucked up shit, And so imperialist foreign policy pays. How does it pay? Through dispossession. That's some bare knuckle primitive accumulation shit. That means that war is necessary. The deployment of force is necessary. Smedley Butler, the famous Marine general, he wrote this little pamphlet, War is a Racket. Everyone needs to go read that shit.
Everyone does need to read that.
We're in the War is a Racket era. Defense strategy on behalf of the nation, supposedly, it's going to be a bunch of land grabs and land deals. You know what I mean? People are going to eat shit for it. And who's going to benefit? The Doge boys. Fuck the Doge boys. Yeah. So I ranted yesterday for like 40 something minutes. It was not planned. But there was a lot going on, especially the Bridge Colby stuff. But like, when you got to be like hyper alert when you see signs of imperialism, like that should be triggering. And that's not to say that there's no imperialism in Biden's foreign policy, because there is some actually. And we can talk about that at any point if you want. But fucking got to be on alert, man. That's what being, that's what being woke used to mean. It was about like, Erykah Badu, don't sleep, like if you come from like a background that's oppressed or that's marginalized in some way, if you're aware of how you're exploited or marginalized in some way, you gotta stay alert, because you can get fucked at any moment, and we're entering an era where that applies to most of us. So hopefully we can find some solidarity in that shit. I don't know. Anyway, so that was yesterday. I didn't even mean to talk about that, but it is what it is. If you're on this live, feel free to say hi at any point. I have this set up so that I can monitor the chat in both places. When I get going, sometimes I like forget to look at it, but I'll try to pay attention to that. There's a few things there's like 20 things to hit in the dumpster fire this week. So like I can always talk about whatever. That's what I do. But I have some stuff that I'm like most prepared to talk about. And the first, this got me. This is actually from like 2 days ago. Let me see if I can share this shit. Yeah, CNN reported it first, but it's reported everywhere by now. The Senate passes the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. So this is what like funds the budget, bill that bans gender affirming care for transgender children of service members. This is like many things in our current era. It's fucked, right? So the NDAA, it funds the Pentagon at the level the baseline level of 800 minus supplementals, minus money squirreled away in other pockets, baseline funding, $895 billion just for next year. This is not some 10-year window of money. This is just next year. Okay. $895 billion as the baseline. Okay. And as a condition of opting into this insanity, Republicans snuck in a measure that would ban trans kids who are the children of active duty military people and guardsmen and reservists from getting health care. So they're taking away health care from trans kids. And Democrats are voting for this so that they can have a $1 trillion military rather than taking up a fight for trans kids as part of an anti-militarist foreign policy, which would nest nicely with a left populist foreign policy, which responds to the problems in the world as it actually is. Instead of that, we say, let's have a $1 trillion defense budget. Let's do military primacy some more because it's been going so well. And then in exchange, well, trans kids are going to have to eat it in addition to everyone else who normally has to eat it. Like, this is what I've said many times and will probably keep saying. I need to theorize this formally. I probably need to write it in a paper. Militarism and reactionary politics go together because militarism is reactionary. Okay. That's just the truth, and the Democratic Party, as usual, ought to be fucking ashamed of itself. So the Democratic Party, only 11 senators opposed this bill, this take healthcare away from trans kids bill in the name of military primacy, right? So Tammy Baldwin, Cory Booker, Andy Kim, Ed Markey, Jeff Merkley, Bernie, Adam Schiff, Debbie Stabenow, Elizabeth Warren, Peter Welch, Ron Wyden. These were the Democratic senators who, they're not perfect, They're and some of those senators have giant problems with their record on certain issues. On this, they were the only senators who opposed the bill. All the other Democratic senators voted for this, trading military primacy for sacrificing trans kids bill. That is fucked. Fuck the other senators. They got a lot to answer for, a lot. And some of them are people who are good on certain issues, Brian Schatz, Chris Murphy. These, there are a few people who have a good politics sometimes, but not on this shit. If you're a Democrat and you're championing military primacy and you're accepting stripping healthcare from trans kids, you need to revisit everything. You're fucked, but shout out to the 11 senators who are not fucked, right? Even though some of them have problems on other issues. So, man, that's that bullshit. Let me see what else we got. Yeah, I'm 11 people in the chat. This is fun. So, I feel like this deserves way more attention. Let me see if I can share this here. So Rashida Tlaib, one of the Justice Democrats in the Congress, she and Summer Lee and I think AOC, I can't remember, some of the Justice Democrats signed this letter out to the chairman of the Federal Maritime Commission. This is fucking crazy, man. Okay, so Federal Maritime Commission under, Biden's presidency is investigating Spain right now because Spain has denied entry to U.S. ships that are carrying weapons bound for Israel. right? And Spain is blocking U.S. arms transit on the way to Israel, obviously because of the genocide in Gaza. And because they've said specifically, it's because they're trying to uphold international law. They're trying to be not complicit or party to genocide. This is fucking obvious. The math here is not complicated. And the idea that the way Federal Maritime Commission works, for people who don't know, they conduct an investigation, and if they find that U.S. vessels are being denied entry to foreign ports, they then recommend sanctions on that other government. And so the sanctions come in the form of fines, millions of dollars or whatever, but also in reciprocal denial of entry. So like if this investigation continues, what's going to happen is that the U.S., probably under Trump, since we're about to hand over the baton, but what's going to happen is the U.S. is going to deny entry to Spanish vessels in U.S. ports. That is sanctions, and that is sanctions against a good government for upholding international law, which means, once again, we're putting ourselves and the power of the state on the side against international law. This is fucked. Cori Bush was the other one who signed the letter. Yeah. So this is, maybe you can see it better zoomed in like that. But yeah. So Rashida Tlaib et al. Is arguing in this letter that this investigation needs to be dropped straight away, because not pursued further, because the only reason you do the investigation is to justify the application of sanctions, and America cannot be sanctioning other countries, democracies, for upholding international law. Although if we're going to be arming a genocide, why not sanction countries for upholding international law? Like, let's go full bad guy, mask off, 100%, might as well. So that's what's going on with this letter. And that's not cool. So shout out to Rashida Tlaib, shout out to Cori Bush, and shout out, god dang it, who is the third one? I can't even remember. Shout outs to anybody who thinks that the power of the American state ought to be on the side of international law as opposed to undermining it, ought to be opposed to genocide instead of facilitating it. You know what I mean? So that's that. What else do we got? Oh man. So I saw, mainstream media obviously sucks. Mainstream TV for the most part sucks. Mainstream news is horrific. If they were doing their jobs, I wouldn't feel the need to even sound off the way I do. You know what I mean? But they're not completely worthless. 60 Minutes, one of the stalwarts of the mainstream, they did a kind of deep investigation into the Israeli beeper bomb shit. And it was like surprisingly thorough, surprisingly good. So let me see if I can pull that up. Just like a little short snippet of it here.
How to convince Hezbollah to switch to this bulkier pager.
I remember the day that I came to our director, put it on the table, and he was furious. He was telling us, there is no chance that anyone will buy such a big device. It's not comfortable in their pockets. It's heavy.
Very heavy.
Very heavy. It's no
Very
good.
heavy.
Yeah.
Go back and bring me something else. It took me 2 weeks to convince him that although it's ugly, it has character.
Character meaning added features, which they touted in fake ads on YouTube. Robust, dustproof, waterproof, long battery life.
We make advertising.
Okay, so first of all, that's impressive and hilarious. Like, there's something about this and the way that they're dubbing this guy's voice that makes me think of like Larry David and Curb Your Enthusiasm or something. But the idea that like this operation was so sophisticated that it created the Israeli operation to set up this beeper shit was so sophisticated that it like set up fake websites, fake ads, selling the quality of these beepers. That's next level, and it makes me wonder about every time I see like an ad on Facebook or Instagram or something now, especially when it's like weird, mysterious company you've never heard of. Anyways, I'll keep going here.
Movies and brochures, and we put it on internet, and it became the best product in the beeper area in the world.
Did people other than Hezbollah want to buy this based on what was being said about it online?
Yes, we received several requests from regular potential customers. Obviously, we didn't send to anyone. We just quote them with expensive price.
Mossad wanted to use the name Gold Apollo on its pager, so it set up shell companies, including one in this building in Hungary, to dupe the Taiwanese into partnering with them. So the company
crazy.
in Taiwan, Gold Apollo, did they know that they were working with people from Mossad?
Gold Apollo had zero clue that they are working with the Mossad.
And neither did Hezbollah.
When they are buying from us,
that was actually one of the questions that arose when all this beeper bomb saga came out. Initially, it was like, how much the Taiwanese government obviously didn't know anything, but like, how much did the Taiwanese beeper manufacturer actually know about this whole clandestine operation? This guy, assuming he's to be trusted or whatever, is saying that, the Taiwanese company didn't know shit. So let's keep it going.
They have zero clue that they are buying from the Mossad. We make like Truman Show. Everything is controlled by us behind the scene. In their experience, everything is normal. Everything was 100% kosher, including businessmen, marketing, engineers, showroom, everything.
To further the plot, Mossad
evil.
hired the Gold Apollo saleswoman Hezbollah was used to working with before. She offered them the first batch of pagers as an upgrade free of charge. By September 2024, Hezbollah had 5,000 pagers in their pockets.
That is wild, dude. So this is old news, and yet ongoing news in a way, like I am disgusted by this. There's more emotive shit I can later on. I guess the only thing I have to really say that would be a value add analytically is to say like, this is obviously state terrorism, not even state sponsored terrorism, state conducted terrorism. This Mossad guy who's spilling the beans to 60 Minutes is making that abundantly clear, and so this was a deliberate operation. It was targeted. They knew that there was going to be casualties. I'm not going to do the whole 60-minute spiel here, but if you watch the whole thing, and it's available online, they they show video of like blood and places where the beepers exploded and the casualty count and all of that. Like, this is fucked, and it's a state that did it, and it's straight up terrorism, and it's by the same government that we are arming. What is that? We're arming, and we're also about to start sanctioning good governments on behalf of being able to continue arming this government. What was the point of the war on terror if we're just 20 years later gonna be supporting state terrorism? I mean, like, what the fuck? So I guess you could say I'm not happy about this. What else we got? Larry David coded. That's funny. Yeah. Anyways, you should watch the 60 Minutes thing. It's awesome. And it shows me that you can still pull some decent stuff out of traditional media from time to time. What else we got? Okay. This is the best article I have read in like a year. I'm not kidding. So The Nation has this piece called "The Blob is Furious About Gaza, but That's Not Enough." and it's written by this guy Joseph Burton, and he's a retired diplomat, and I I don't know if I know him. I don't think I do, but the name sounds super familiar. Um, doesn't have a big public profile, but like I read a lot of shit for my day job, for this night job, whatever this is that I'm doing, I read a lot, and this is easily the top 10 of what I read this year. It might be the best thing I've read this year. And he talks about the reality of what it's like for like foreign policy middle management in Washington, like the bureaucracy, the civil service itself, what foreign policy is as a social structure is in its composition. It's different than it used to be, like the pale Yale male shit, like white bros from the Ivy League. US foreign policy was like that 100% all the way up until kind of like the unipolar moment. And if I had to disagree with the piece at all, it's that he caricatures this, and he suggests that once the unipolar moment hit, like after the Cold War, that basically these guys that run foreign policy have been replaced with more diverse, better representation, better gender balance. There's a way in which that's true, but it wasn't like flipping a switch. And the pale Yale male guys, they still run the show. What do you think Tony Blinken is? What do you think Brett McGurk is? Like, I mean, Jake Sullivan is not, I don't think, from the Ivy League, but it's the same type of people running this shit, you know? So that's they still have, look who just got nominated for Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, fourth generation aristocrat, Bridge Colby. You know what I mean? So the foreign policy apparatus still has like a strong concentration of these the waspy blue blood elite types. You know what I mean? But there's also more than that. So even so, you have to understand, like, the traditional ruling elite are still there, but they're surrounded by a bunch of lower level people who are Black, Puerto Rican, Mexican, Filipino, Nigerian, who are gender diverse. There are some trans people in the system. There are more women in leadership, and so that's all to the good. It's like, it makes you think like, Obama's arc of history shit, like, we were getting better, we were getting more diverse. The problem is, it's the rainbow bombs problem. Foreign policy has not fundamentally changed since the end of the Cold War, except to make it more militarist. You know what I mean? So like, it's still an apparatus that's about military primacy, but we got more women in leadership, so that's great. There's more Black folks in the technocracy. That's great, but it's still ruling class shit. Do you want a more diverse ruling class, or do you want no ruling class at all? Fuck. So the representation and diversity is a good thing, but it should not be the fucking horizon. So if I had any dissent about his piece, it's a little bit of like how he caricatures how good it was before. But in this piece, let me show you the money paragraph. It really is well written, and he gets a lot right. He describes how the foreign policy technocracy, the civil service, how it is basically middle class. Like, at one point he calls it a proletariat, which is an overstatement, but it gets to the point, that his point, which is that that these are like, to work in foreign policy now, is like, everybody who's on this stream probably knows, it's a specialization. You don't go study accounting and then go work in foreign policy most of the time. You study international relations, you study public policy, you study, area studies. Like, you go focus specifically on some aspect of international politics, and then you get a master's degree from American University or Georgetown or some shit, or if you're really lucky, the Kennedy School. And then you pipeline in and you go be a civil servant, and then you buy a brownstone or a condo in DC, and then that's your life, right? It's a middle class vocation. So that reality matters. And what Joe Burton is calling out in this piece, let me find the key paragraph here. Okay, here it is. Let me bring it up bigger. He says that Gaza changed everything, right? The U.S. support for genocide in contravention of international law and in contravention of domestic law, it has destroyed everything, right? Naomi Klein said the other day that Gaza has blown a hole in our moral universe, which is like a really good way to put it. But Joe Burton says in this piece, this is the upshot: to work in DC now is to understand that the genocide in Palestine is not a mistake. The people actually in charge are doing this. Your job is a farce. Your work means nothing. The very top echelons are shredding everything you stood for. You will never afford a house in Washington. If you have a catastrophic health emergency, even you will need to turn to GoFundMe. And every day when you open your phone, you see children mangled alive with weapons that you know legally should not be delivered. Holy shit. That's gangster as fuck, you know? That's funny because it's true. It's tragic, you know? Like, that's so on the nose. I've said versions of this over the past year or so, because like I talk to younger folks in the system a lot of times who are trying, like, people who specialize in international relations or go study this shit in grad school, they could have done finance bro stuff. They could have done accounting or gone into law. Um, Maybe they thought it was too hard. I don't think it's that much harder than what we study, but they chose international relations because they have some sense of like, this is an interesting way to make a living, and there's some desire among a lot of us to serve a greater good, you know? So like, a lot of us get into the system with the best of intentions. I know that was the case for me. And you want to be on the right side of humanity and of history, and you think you can make a difference on the inside. And that's been a increasingly dubious proposition for a while. But now, like Joe Burton is calling out, it's just fucking impossible, you know? And what's funny is, like, when I was working in the system, when I was at the Pentagon from like '09 to 2014, you could still, as like a sort of middle ranking civil servant, you could buy a house, and then you'd be trapped in a 30-year mortgage that you could barely afford, you know, but you could afford that. Now, the people who are just getting into the system now, like, forget it. Between interest rates and the inflation of housing prices, it's pretty fucked. Um, I'm just catching up with the comments here in the chat. Yeah. I mean, I feel super bad for, one of the reasons why I decided to start jumping on Twitch is specifically to get a little bit out of my elder millennial bubble and engage more with Gen Z, because I feel like the system is pretty fucking rigged against an entire generation of people, and like, I was on the kind of the lucky side of my own generation, but even a lot of millennials got fucking soaked with the Great Recession or whatever, and the global financial crisis, and shit has never recovered. The people who are millennials who sort of made it were like people who got into tech early, or who got into government service early enough to be able to afford a house. And one of the dilemmas currently, like that this Peace in the Nation is foregrounding, is that you if you're a middle management type person in government now, it means that you came to government service as a foreign policy wonk or whatever when I had originally done it. Like if I was in the system, I'd be in SES now, senior executive service. And that those people have $1 million mortgages in DC. They have kids in private school, $30,000 a year, you know, and signing them up for ballet and shit. That coding camp, all of that is a lifestyle that requires you to keep milking that government job. It's a I mean, they're trapped in the sense that, like, now that they're facing the fact that they're supporting a genocide, that they're part of a machinery that supports a genocide, what are they going to do about it? This is one of the things Joe Burton talks about in the piece. It's like, well, if you have a specialized degree in international relations, you have been trained to believe that foreign policy is all you can do. And that's not entirely true. You could do any job that's white collar and administrative, and it wouldn't be a stretch for an IR graduate to go study, law or finance or something. Like, I studied finance in grad school before my PhD. It's not fun, but it's not stimulating, but it's also intellectually not harder than international relations or like making sense of foreign policy stuff. So like, but these people, when you go through training, when you go through a Kennedy school, when you go through a SICE, you're so bore-sighted and so narrowly focused on the thing that you're trying to make into a vocation, foreign policy stuff, that you feel like you're made to feel like it's the only thing you can do. And a lot of you, I mean, a lot of us come into it thinking that it's like being a writer. You can't imagine doing anything else. You don't do it because it's fun. You do it because you can't really conceive of doing anything else. For some reason, it just grabs some people, And the trouble with that is that you could that's an okay system to admire and to try to opt into in a world that's structured very differently from the world that we have now. The world that we have now makes you a tool, an instrument of domination and of fucking death, and of, at best, of an imperial mode of living, at best. That's not great. And if you've got kids in private school and $1 million mortgage and a brownstone and DuPont Circle and shit like that, you get to take nice trips and fly business class to go meet with the sheikh of whatever at some hotel and have Bertram muesli for breakfast. That shit, you're going to drop all that to be unemployed because the foreign policy is a foreign policy that you disagree with. I think most people don't make that choice. I think most people have no choice but to suck it up. It's so sad, I'm very lucky that I was able to extract myself from the system before I had to face this choice. But one of the reasons, I don't want to get too personal here, one of the reasons I tried to opt out of the system in the first place, and I got lucky, was because I saw that, like, foreign policy was a kind of machinery of death. Like, it was empowering the wrong people. We were so distant from anything that resembled like peace or humanity. It was alienating and it was corrupt. Like, it was all financed by defense industry money, Wall Street people, fucking Google, Eric Schmidt. Like, bad people were funding it. It was a corrupt system. It was making strategically horrible choices. There was no prospect of it seeming to get any better. And so I was like, I need to seek life elsewhere if I can. Everybody's got to secure the bag. Everybody's got to make a living. Everybody's got to make rent. And so you do what you got to do. And I don't judge people for that. And if I had no other choice, maybe I'd be grinding away at the policy, supporting a genocide shit too. I don't know. I would hope not. I would really hope not. But the deeper you go into the trappings of like a bougie middle class life, the harder it is to get out on moral grounds or principled grounds. You know what I mean? So, and now it's like the mask is so off with American foreign policy. If you're studying international relations right now, there are many things interesting that you can do with that, but serving in government is one of the most questionable things that you can do with that. Yes, you get paid good money or whatever, but I don't know, dude. That's not. This is especially in the Trump years with all this loyalist schedule F shit. Like, this is not great. Let me catch up on the chat here. I've been on one. So fuck. What do I think about the Greenland shit? Actually, that was in the live stream yesterday, which is I think still on Twitch, but I put it up on YouTube too. There's a clip floating around. Trump buying Greenland. It's not just that in the first Trump term, he floated buying Greenland, which is not for sale, obviously. but the way he described it yesterday, it's not about buying Greenland. It's about conquering, annexing Greenland. He's calling it like vital national interest. It's that magic pixie dust of violence language, so that's troubling, but it's also imperialism. What else we got in the chat? Yeah. Appreciate the love for the crawler at the bottom of the screen. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the nation piece. Like I said, one of the best pieces I've read in the past year, even though it's not exactly what I would have written, but maybe like 85%. And it's very rare that I find something written where I'm like, oh man, that's what I should have written, or that's what I would have written, really good. Yes, thank you for shouting out the Undiplomatic newsletter on Substack, un-diplomatic.com. Link is in the chat here somewhere on Twitch. Yeah. You don't have to be unemployed. You can just move to New Zealand. This is true. Actually, it's very hard to move to New Zealand. I discovered this the easy way, the hard way. It was easy. It's hard to move fucking anywhere. But when I moved to New Zealand in 2017, the job at my university, they basically arranged for us to get permanent residency visa like fucking right away. And so it was fairly smooth to get here. Whereas for a lot of people, it can be like getting a visa arranged is a bitch. So it wasn't a bitch for me, but there are weird downsides to living in New Zealand. And that's not what I'm going to talk about right now. So, yeah. Let's not adjudicate. Let's not litigate who Greenland belongs to. That's like beyond the scope right now. So what else we got? Teamsters, Amazon. I just want to show this very short clip from the Teamsters because Amazon warehouse workers are on strike. Big up to them. Let me share this. All right. So those are one of the that's one of the locations of striking workers right now. So right now, Amazon workers are on strike. It's the biggest strike ever against Amazon in U.S. history. And they're part of the Teamsters. And Amazon in New York, it's freezing cold, mind you, where these guys are at. And the Amazon warehouse in the background here it again. They opened up these hoses, freezing cold outside. This turns to ice in a few minutes. They're trying to flood out and freeze out the striking workers in Michigan. What do you expect, So Amazon union busting. At one of the warehouses in New York, Amazon also brought in the NYPD to break the picket line to be able to get scabs in and out. And that's to be expected. Police are not on the side of the fucking workers. Like, the security state has always been against the working class. And this is like, labor history is the history of oligarchs and kleptocrats using their influence with the state to bring the state down on workers, so it's as it ever was, except that right now unions are in a weaker position than they've been, thank you neoliberalism, than any time in the past 100 years almost. So labor militancy is back. Starbucks workers are also on strike, and they're actually advocating a boycott, just as like some people know this, but like, boycotts and strikes ain't the same thing. Strikes is when workers deny their labor to the bosses. And this is this is like their ace in the hole negotiating tactic. You deny your labor. In theory, they can't do anything. If you hold a picket line, then they can't substitute your labor. You know what I mean? And that forces them to bargain. And then boycotting is a customer thing. It's a patronage thing. So like, do you use the business while the workers are on strike? And the answer is not straightforward. Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. And so you boycott when the workers on strike want you to boycott to bring added pressure on the company. Sometimes you want the company to still be bringing in profits as normal, so that there's a basis on which striking workers can make their plea. And so they don't want the employer to go bust, to go bankrupt. They want a greater share of the spoils, of the profits. Overall, workers deserve a much greater share of the national income than is currently being hoarded by the fucking bosses, by capital, by owners of capital. So in the Starbucks case, Starbucks workers who are striking want a boycott. The Amazon workers, I don't think yet they're not calling for a boycott necessarily. I might be wrong about that. It's worth fact checking that. But the Starbucks workers do want a boycott of Starbucks over the 4-day holiday period. So big up to solidarity to Amazon workers and to Starbucks workers. Labor militancy is back. We just need to shift the balance of power or whatever. And capital is going to be union busting in the meantime. One like small data point I wanted to share was that like all workers, they're agitating for greater pay and benefits. But in Amazon's case specifically, it's also about safety standards. So of all warehouse employees in the US, Amazon workers account for 36% of them, but Amazon warehouses are responsible for 53% of all warehouse injuries, which means Amazon warehouses are substantially more dangerous for workers on an everyday basis than even just regular warehouses, which are still capitalist sites of accumulation and exploitation or whatever. It's not like normal warehouses in America are great, wonderful places to work. They just have a much lower injury rate than Amazon warehouses. So this is about business processes. This is about safety standards. This is like in Amazon's interest to do. But when you're all about that wealth hoarding life, you're too greedy to see what's even in your own interest. You know what I mean? There was a book, I'll probably mention this again at some point, but in the 90s, there's a political sociologist named Charles Tilley. He wrote a book called Durable Inequality or Durable Inequalities. And the key thing that I took away from it was that, like, he described two concepts for how inequality gets reproduced and grows. Where does inequality come? What are the mechanisms of inequality, right? And he's like, there are two. One is exploitation. And that's what we see with Amazon and the workers. That's why the workers are on strike. They're being exploited. And they're not even being exploited. Like, you sell your labor on the market, you have to sign up for a certain amount of exploitation, but they're being exploited to the point where, like, it's not even safe for them and they can't make a living. So any system of exploitation should at least be self-sustaining at a minimum, right? And this is not self-sustaining. And so the workers have had enough, and that's why they're on fucking strike. But the other, so exploitation is one mechanism of reproducing inequality. The other is opportunity hoarding. And this is the problem with having a ruling class. It's the problem with having aristocrats, blue bloods, the people in charge. You know what I mean? So opportunity hoarding, getting for yourself at the expense of others, concentrating wealth rather than redistributing it or pre-distributing it or whatever, concentrating power at the expense of others, all that shit. So those are the two mechanisms of durable inequality. It's exploitation, opportunity hoarding. It's just useful to know that, I suppose. What else? In the chat, someone goes, these systems, like what Amazon's trying to run, they're sustainable because the workers are replaceable. Yeah, they're replaceable because of, I mean, economic immiseration. You create a system that puts workers in a desperate place, and then they have very little alternative. Like, where are you going to go? I mean, you could turn to crime, I guess, or become like Luigi Formaggio, whatever the guy's name is. So that's like one path, you know, like, and if you're not going to go do dirt, then of course you have no choice but to sign on to places like Amazon. So they're easily replaceable, but they're partly replaceable because we're atomized and we're isolated, and because there's, like, traditions of solidarity have been broken. You know, the norm of don't cross the picket line is coming alive again, but like that hasn't been a thing in most parts of American life for a long time, you know. So the reason why unions are so important, they're not magical or something. The reason why they're so important is because they pool. There's more of us than there is of them, you know, and they create power out of unity. If you're a functioning block, then you're not replaceable. And that's what the bosses don't want. That's why the union bust, you know? Anyways. What else we got? Oh, this is unfortunate. Let me share this real quick. U.S. CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command. A very short video. So Central Command shared this video by. Hold on. They shared this video and announced that they're conducting airstrikes now as in yesterday, against Iran-backed Houthi missile storage facilities in Yemen. We are attacking Yemen, like, basically as we speak. Let me share the screen here. Okay. Here's the little fucking video. You get the picture. It doesn't show the bombing itself. It shows the like AWACS and stuff taking off. Or I couldn't tell what kind of aircraft that was. But they're basically bragging about it, you know. I don't know why they think that's okay. But so what's the message here? You know, the message is we are fighting a war in Yemen. Do you know who we're fighting this for? Fucking Saudi Arabia. And, you know, less directly Israel, because the Houthis that were trying to attack in Yemen were trying to attack them for them trying to disrupt commercial shipping in the Red Sea. And the reason they're trying to disrupt commercial shipping in the Red Sea is because they're trying to like show solidarity with Palestinians. Like they wanted a ceasefire in Gaza. That was where this shit immediately came from, late last year and early this year. So we're rather than coming to terms with a better foreign policy, a more restrained, less militarized foreign policy, we're expanding war in the Middle East on behalf, like, you know, throwing good money after bad. Super fucked, you know. And they're bragging about it. They're bragging about it on Twitter. It's insane. This is what we're doing. Like, oh, how many people even knew that we were bombing Yemen? How many people knew that we had troops in Syria, which is the other fun one, right? Ken Klippenstein, the baller ass investigative reporter who seems to get all the scoops. Let me see if I can pull up his shit. Oh, I don't know if I have it here. Ken Klippenstein was sharing a thing about our military presence in Syria. Yeah, damn it. I don't have it here. Basically, the Pentagon announced yesterday or the day before yesterday, that we were previously reporting there were 900 U.S. troops in Syria. Okay. So we have a troop presence in Syria, occupying force, right? They announced that actually we've been telling you 900, but it's 2,000 troops. Okay. So more than double the troop presence than what they've been reporting. And most people don't even know that we've been fighting a fucking war in Syria this whole time, you know? So like, that's how unaccountable this is. That's how out of control this shit is. It's fucking nuts. So yeah. Anyways, regional war in Middle East. I don't know who that serves other than arms manufacturers, which it clearly does serve them. What else we got? The Korean fortune-telling shaman coup plotter. I have not really seen this reported anywhere except in this kind of brilliant Twitter thread by Raphael Rashid, who does a bunch of really good journalism from Korea. So let me just share this real quick and then walk through what he's saying. This is for people who are tracking the Korea coup stuff. Kind of nuts. It's all kind of nuts. So he says, hopefully you can see this. Korea's martial law probe has uncovered extraordinary meetings at a burger joint involving a former military commander who, after being dishonorably discharged, was found to be living in a fortune-telling shop where he allegedly practiced divination alongside other shamans. Shaman solidarity, you know? Good for them, I guess. 2 meetings were documented at Loteria, December 1st and December 3rd, which is just before the coup. Police have confirmed through CCTV that active duty commander and colonels met with No Sang-won, a civilian ex-commander living as a fortune teller, to allegedly plan the martial law operation. So one of the coup plotters was this unemployed or dishonorably discharged shaman / fortune teller. So one of the, and this, get this, at the December 1st meeting that they had at the burger place, he met with current Intel commander Moon Sang-ho and 2 colonels. Okay. Moon Sang-ho, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm like 95% sure it's possible there's more than one Moon Sang-ho in Korea. But I'm pretty sure this is the same guy who had been a defense attaché from South Korea in Washington around the time when I was either leaving the Pentagon or entering the think tank world. And he used to show up to our fucking meetings and briefings and shit. Like, I used to work with this guy, possibly, which would not be a surprise. I mean, like, the Ministry of National Defense in South Korea, they are thick as thieves with the US, with the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And they were also the lead ministry of coup plotting, which is why its minister stepped down. He was best buddies with Biden's Secretary of Defense. Nobody talks about that shit. You know what I mean? So this is funny. This whole thing. Oh, and then the shaman coup plotter guy, Rafael Rashid, goes on to say, despite being a civilian after his 2018 dishonorable discharge for sexual harassment, which is tragically common in Korea, he was allegedly giving operational instructions to active duty commanders like my man Moon Sang-ho while working and living at his fortune-telling shop near Loteria. Loteria has shit burgers for what it's worth, but they're very popular. I think all fast food burgers are kind of shit, so I'm not shitting on Loteria if that's your thing. But yeah, kind of nutty. Let me catch up on the chat here. Well, if you think there is no genocide, this is not the show for you. Okay. And reality is probably not the show for you either. So fucking thanks for playing, but I'm not having it, dog. Okay. What else we got? Oh, this is interesting. I thought I would flag this. Ukraine war conspiracy theory. I want to flag it because it's a conspiracy theory and because it's fucking silly. And purely for that reason, not because I think there's anything to it. So let me just share the screen briefly. So there's this professor in Europe. Again, these got to watch out for these professors. But she says, quote, she went on TV, a Turkish television show, and said the US can pull out of Ukraine because they got everything they wanted. They cut the pipeline. They destroyed the German economy. The overall US interest in the Ukraine war was about destroying the German and European economy. This is not true. You know what I mean? This is not true. The purpose, like the way the national security state bros think about war in Ukraine, it is definitely not about suborning or destroying Europe in any way, right? So that's conspiracy theory, and it's wrong. The reason why I wanted to flag it is because there's something to this. What she's describing is a sort of consequence of military support for Ukraine, for treating Ukraine as a proxy war with Russia, right? Because the project of fighting Russia is part of the project of defending and sustaining American military primacy. And American military primacy cannot be separated from the American government's desire for economic hegemony. And that is on the wane. That, as if you caught the live stream yesterday, or if you've caught half the shit I've written for the past 2 years, like that is a different world. And America is trying to claw back a greater share of a shrinking economic pie. And part of how it's doing that is through the use of state power in a way that we condemn when China does it, or when almost anybody does it that we don't like, And so the war has not been good for Ukraine, obviously. Conquest by Russia would not be good for Ukraine either. But the war has also not been good for Germany or the European economy, for sure. You know what I mean? But the point from the national security state's perspective was actually to bleed Russia as much as possible, to weaken Russia. And that's part of why would you feel the need to do that? Because if you have military primacy, or if you seek military primacy, others must be subordinated, must be brought low. There must be a favorable imbalance of power. Therefore, you want to weaken your rivals, literally. And they've said this out loud. Again, Biden's Secretary of Defense is on the record about this. So there's a consequence of the Ukraine war that is not good for Europe and for Germany, right? But that's not part of the design, you know? So first time I had heard this particular conspiracy theory, it's weird that it had enough traction to sort of like be touted by some tenured professor, and that it's like circulating and on TV. So that's that. All right. And two more planned stories. So economic anxiety and the racist right. There's a guy I really like named Olufemi Taiwo. He's a scholar, and he wrote a piece in a magazine called Hammer and Hope. Let me see if I can share the screen here real quick. He made some interesting points. The false narrative of economic anxiety. He's doing a retrospective on like who voted for Trump and why Trump won, you know? And he's not, despite what the title says, he's not repudiating the idea that masses of Americans are experiencing economic anxiety. And he's not repudiating that economic anxiety in America is up. He thinks it is up, but he thinks it's like wallpaper. Like it's almost to be taken as a given. Like, how could that not be true? And the question then becomes, what accounts for the shift from like supporting Biden in 2020 to Trump in 2024? You know what I mean? And so he makes a number of really good points in this space, but he says specifically, let me see if I can find it. Here we go. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll read it out loud anyway. The problem with the economic anxiety narrative was never the explicit, even self-evident part of its case. Of course, voting trends and political behavior strongly correlate to people's actual felt and expected ability to meet their basic needs and provide for those they care for. The problem, in contrast, was the implicit aspect of the narrative, the idea that explaining voters' behavior via economic anxiety rendered other explanations unnecessary, particularly those that highlight the role of racism, misogyny, and xenophobia, and the machinations of political actors who stoke and exploit these attitudes. Yeah, boy. You know what I'm saying? Yes. So on the ball, right? To accept that economic anxiety is playing a role in driving the politics of reaction, driving politics right. That's true enough, but that doesn't mean that you can remove the sort of racial and sexist layers that are part of that. You know what I mean? And so to reinforce this point, there's actually a really good Substack called the Young Men Research Initiative. And let me see if I can share this screenshot. Yeah, so hopefully you can see this. They did polling, and they're looking at men. The big question with all of this polling stuff in the Trump election is like young men, probably like disproportionately people who listen to my show, but like at the different age brackets under the age of 29, they asked them, do you feel financially stable? Will you be able to buy a house in the near future? Are you concerned about the availability of jobs as like the main thing? And then they asked questions about uh, guys can have their reputations destroyed for speaking their minds these days. This is a gender coded thing. Society looks down on men who are masculine. Again, gender coded thing. Feminism is about women over men. Trans men aren't really men. And what they find is on these like economic anxiety indicators, I do not feel financially stable. Overwhelmingly, those people, they are looking to left populism. They voted for Harris. They probably would have voted for a Bernie or somebody more radical, somebody who would actually, Harris wasn't responding to shit people for people's needs. You know, she's a fucking horrible candidate for what it's worth, but um, she represented the leftmost option, you know? And so the financially insecure people were voting their interests in that respect. Right. But when you look at the sexism questions on this poll, who did they vote for? These guys who are afraid, like, you know, masculinity is looked down on. Feminism is about women over men. Trans men aren't men. People with those views are sexist. And yes, lots of bros in our age bracket and younger than me are sexist. This is it's something we need to work on, but it's like part of the reality. So what the election showed is that those people who were already sexist, who were already quote unquote anti-woke, they voted for Trump in droves. I mean, like, look at the numbers here, you know, not even close. And so Trump benefited from being the representative and the voice for people who were already misogynists, right? So this is useful data, and it fits with Olufemi Taiwo's thing about the economic anxiety narrative, you know? So, like, once again, the problem was the implicit aspect of the economic anxiety narrative. The idea that explaining voters' behavior via economic anxiety rendered other explanations unnecessary, particularly those that highlight the role of racism, misogyny, and xenophobia, right? So right-leaning men in this last election just happened to be disproportionately men who had sexist and transphobic views. So shout out to the Young Men Research Initiative. It's useful to know. All right. Let me catch up on the chat here. I'm running out of coffee. All right. Yo, a lot of shit in the chat. All right. I think that's enough. Okay. One more story. This is just I find fascinating / fun. The Financial Times had this chart. Okay. Breakfast cereal sales are way down, and avocado toast is and Bircher muesli is way up, right? So the Financial Times story was called Overnight Oats and Avocado Toast Eat Big Cereals Breakfast. And it says that, like, the consumption of breakfast, this is like where millennials are really strong, or like they overrepresented in the market. They are eating smoothies, avocado toast, which I'm guilty of. Yep. And Instagram friendly overnight oats. That's the Financial Times words. I'm not sure that overnight oats are Instagram friendly, but whatever. They said that 70% of US households still eat cereal, but only 12% eat cereal every day. And when you look at the chart, cereal sales are way down. Like, and they're just, I mean, cratering, right? I'm not sure what that spike is about in 2019, 2020, but people are like off cereal. And I don't know, are you off cereal? I like the thing about first of all, avocados are very good for you. So I'm always trying to eat avocados. Second of all, I try not to eat breakfast until like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, intermittent fasting or whatever. But the when I do eat breakfast, like that, it's still my first meal of the day. I just eat it closer to like lunchtime. But yeah, like it doesn't ever strike me to eat cereal. And I have not eaten cereal in, I don't know, 15 years, something like that. But the reason is not because I associate it with kids or whatever, or it's like cool versus uncool, or I don't think I've ever taken a picture of my breakfast for Instagram, you know. But the reason um, I don't go for the cereal is because it's a bunch of sugar. It's horribly bad for you. And from the time I was in high school, cereal boxes, I'm not mad at cereal. I feed cereal to my kid, but it's a bunch of lies. It's a bunch of propaganda, you know? You get shredded wheat or Cocoa Puffs or something, and it makes some claim on the box about it's going to lower your cholesterol, or like this is how you have a balanced diet. I'm going to have a balanced diet from eating 100 grams of sugar for breakfast. Are you fucking serious? By carbo loading, by eating ultra processed food with chemicals in it that I don't even know how to pronounce them, you know? Like this is the idea that like, you're going to get your vitamin D and vitamin A because I'm eating cereal is a joke. You know, if you're going to eat birthday cake for breakfast, just lean into it. Be like, life is short. Life is short. Get your sugar rush now. That would be like an honest marketing campaign for a cereal box that I could get behind. But the double speak, the like cereal propaganda shit is a major turnoff. And so maybe this is my elder millennial speaking, but like that I'm not interested. You know, I'm off sugar now, but like for a long time I would eat sugar. And so I would not be I had no principled opposition to cereal, but I don't want to be gaslit by the cereal box. I don't want you to tell me that if I eat this cereal, I'm going to be like Michael Jordan, because I know that sure as shit is not true. I'm going to go into 3-hour sugar coma after eating this cereal, you know? It's like, but you're fucking lying to me and telling me that it's going to like improve my cholesterol levels or some shit. So that's fucked up. The final paragraph of the Financial Times piece, interesting quote. It says, breakfast cereal is still a $12 billion plus year business, but running businesses in secular decline is difficult. Okay, no shit. Right. Right. Also, every business except for weapons manufacturing is in secular decline. Movie theaters might be coming back, but it says companies need to invest in product innovation, marketing, and promotion to defend sales. Competition will only get stiffer. Fast food giants, including McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, and Taco Bell, are all looking to push their morning offerings. There is no shortage of rivals poised to twist the spoon. That's very poetic and clever. I also didn't know that Taco Bell had breakfast, which sounds delicious. I might have to look into that. But this is the Financial Times, for being like this capitalist newspaper, whatever, ruling class newspaper, it has like the best coverage of capitalism that you could ever get. They understand capitalism much better than all the other non-leftists, non-radicals, non-heterodox economists, basically better than all liberals. Like they get it. And they're explaining here, like the tendency of the declining rate of profitability, right? And this is what leads to crises of capital accumulation. But it's like running businesses in secular decline is difficult. The longer you have a sector that makes money, the more competition comes in, competition gets stiffer, and then you can only continue making profits through innovation or marketing, you know, these gimmicks. And otherwise, you're going to face a declining rate of profit. And as the rate of profit declines, well, what happens? This is how we get to imperialism. You know, like you turn to more brutal bare knuckle methods of capital accumulation, you know, including in the defense industry. There's this move now. I should have talked about it, but like they're trying to consolidate into a cartel, like Palantir and Anduril and these guys. I might write about it, but they're trying to form a non-competitive cartel to do business as a collective with the Pentagon, which is super scary. And it deserves more attention. So maybe I will say something more about that in the future. That has nothing to do with avocado toast, obviously. But yeah, so that's the show for today. I don't know how everybody feels about breakfast cereal, but it's clearly a declining industry. But I think they might sell more if they just admitted that like life is short, get your sugar high while you can, stop pretending to be healthy because you're not. All right. I do not understand the raid culture on Twitch. I'm fucking new. So maybe I can give this a shot. I don't know. Let me see here. Can I raid somebody? Let me see. Handing off the baton. Whoa. So I'll give it a try. All right. We'll figure this out another day. Sorry. But this was fun. Cathartic, at least. Un-diplomatic.com. Support us. Read me. Blah, blah, blah.